everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. With the recent storms and cooler weather across much of Oklahoma, many wheat producers are pushing pause on harvest for a little bit. To begin today, Sunup's Curtis Hare talks to Dr. Amanda Silva, our Extension small grain specialist, to get an update.
It's the beginning of June, which is the time of year when combines are rolling out in the field. But Amanda, a lot of the weather has been really wet, and we've had days like this. So has there been a delay in most fields?
Yes, definitely. Wheat is a little bit behind schedule. We would normally see a lot of combine rolling, especially at Southwest Oklahoma. But these days, like cloudy days, rainy days like this, and I guess more of those cool temperatures and cloudy days, it's been delaying wheat harvest. So I am seeing that situations, the wheat's already maybe ready to be cut, but the ground's wet, humidity is really high, and so we just need some sunlight.
And the crop overall had been looking pretty good up to the point to harvest.
Yeah, we started with a drought in the fall. A lot of people had to dust in their wheat. A lot of people planted late, so wheat emerged late. Then we had that February freeze, which affected our crop. Wheat that was planted late maybe was a little bit more hurt than wheat that was planted early. Like I've mentioned before, I think the wheat crop is just looking a little bit more, it's looking a little thinner than usual, and that is because of that February freeze. End of March, April, we went under an extremely drought conditions virtually across all state. And cloudy days really helped our crop to not stress much from that drought period. But then we got some rain, helped with the grain filling, helped with the test weight. But now we just need some drier and sunny days.
And recently it's been a lot of rain, but as you said, in May, there's been more rain in a lot of these areas. So what are some factors that, that can really impact the quality of a wheat crop?
Well, one of the things that it's not gonna be good, it's that some fields may be under standing water right now, and that's not gonna be good for quality, that's not gonna be good for test weight. But we do hope, by end of the week, if the weather, warms up again, and a few days of 90 degrees and sunlight, the conditions should be good for our combines to start rolling again.
Yeah, and when we talked to you a few weeks ago, when we were really initially you were looking at that freeze damage, one thing that you did say that might have helped producers was that wheat went in a little bit later, and so that kind of helped during the growing season where it wouldn't have impacted it as much.
Yes, and definitely that's what we are seeing, for example, in that location in the Panhandle. The producer's field that was planted, I think he planted about 2 weeks after us. We are not seeing any freeze damage there, but in our plots we are seeing, and that varies with varieties too. In that special occasion, I didn't notice maturity difference, but I know in our plots at Chickasha, it's something that it may be showing now, late maturing varieties with less damage than early maturing varieties. In some locations, I am seeing some wheat that we see the effects of that drought stress. For example, at Cimarron County, we could see some drought stress crop there. As we moved into the Texas County, Beaver County, the wheat's looking great. I was just impressed how the wheat looks at Texas County. It's just great. And I know there are a lot of wheat also that is looking great throughout the state, especially considering all the conditions we have had. So I'm very excited to start cutting some wheat.
Just looking forward to some dry, sunny days that hopefully doesn't persist throughout the entire summer.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Amanda. Dr. Amanda Silva, small grain specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. Last week brought the state some great rains in the dry parts of the west, along with additional moisture to keep the east mud-bound. This 7-day map from Wednesday morning shows mostly 2 to 3 inches of rain statewide. This included the Panhandle stations and most of those in the southwest. The highest for the week was near 5 inches at Guthrie. All this recent rain has continued to give us overcast skies and therefore cooler than normal daytime temperature. For the month of May, the state was cloudy more days than not. Here we see that we average for the entire month 15 to 25% less sunlight than the long-term normal. These clouds blocked the afternoon sun and kept us much cooler than normal for the month of May. The average daily high temperature was 4 to 6 degrees below normal for the entire month. Another thing that these clouds do is keep our evapotranspiration or ET rates down. ET is a combination of soil evaporation and plant transpiration. On June 1, the ET ranged from 0.17 in the Panhandle to less than 1/10 of an inch in the east. We need to see those ET rates go up to get our mature wheat crop to dry down and be ready for the combine. Now here's Gary with a better-looking drought map.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, climatological spring is now over. That runs from March 1st through May 31st, and now we look forward to climatological summer, which runs from June 1st through August 31st. Where'd we end up with spring, and what can we look forward to this summer? Let's take a look. Well, the best news we saw from spring and also May is that we had so much rainfall in just the right places that we've almost totally eliminated drought in Oklahoma. We just have 8% of the state covered in drought, and that runs from far southwest Oklahoma up into central Oklahoma. We have a few areas of abnormally dry conditions there in the yellow, but that's really drought on the way out, hopefully, with just a little bit more rainfall. Okay, let's take a look at that spring rainfall. Well, we can see the culprit there in southwest up through central Oklahoma, where they had basically from 5 to 8 inches of rainfall. Still deficits in those regions, but most of the state had pretty good amounts, basically 5 to 6 to 8 inches out in the Panhandle. And we also have some deficits up there in north central Oklahoma, parts of Woods, Alfalfa, Grant counties, that region. So we do need some rainfall in some areas, but for the most part, looking good with surpluses over most of the state. One of the problems we saw with spring was it was so cool at times that it did tend to hamper the recovery of some of that vegetation from that disastrous February freeze. We take a look at the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. Unfortunately, we do see increased odds of below normal temperatures for the next week and a half or so. So that's not going to help much. So that's the outlook for the first part of June at least. Now, when we get deeper into summer, obviously we're going to have a lot of heat. And with all the rainfall we've had, we're going to have a lot of humidity as well. So that's probably something not to look forward to. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Today I thought I'd share a little bit of information about the Big 9 allergens. In 2004, the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act identified 8 foods as major allergens: milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybeans. Additionally, as part of the act, food companies were required to list these 8 allergens on all food labels to inform consumers. The reason that these foods were originally referred to as the Big 8 is that they were responsible for 90% of all food allergies. Unfortunately, over the past 20 years, childhood food allergies have increased approximately 4% per year, so that currently 32 million people suffer from food allergies. On April 23, 2021, the Food Allergy Safety, Treatment, Education, and Research Act was signed into law, and it declared sesame as the 9th major food allergen to be recognized in the United States, effective January 1, 2023. The act also requires the Department of Health and Human Services to release reports on a regular basis of research that involves prevention, treatment, and potential cures of food allergies. So just a little bit of information to keep in mind for people who may suffer from food allergies. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or food.okstate.edu.
Backyard agriculture is more popular than ever these days, including a category of livestock that you may not necessarily think about. OSU Extension is launching a new program to help support honeybee producers. Here's Dr. Courtney Bir to explain.
Backyard agriculture has become very popular. in the last few years, and especially with COVID and people being at home, backyard agriculture has really exploded. And so there's been a lot of calls at the county level for things like backyard poultry and gardening and even honeybees. And so AgEcon partnered with entomology, and we're starting to create the list of fact sheets, starting off with the budget or how much it costs to get started on bees. We do really listen to what the public needs in terms of extension support. So we hear from the county educators what people are looking for, areas that may be unique or different, that need a little bit more support. And when we were hearing about beekeepers and, not even knowing exactly what equipment to buy, so not even having a list of the equipment and the associated costs if they're trying to decide if they want to become a beekeeper, we didn't even have a fact sheet on that. And so we're really starting from the ground level and working on very much the basics, just enough to get people started, and we'll keep building on those materials as we progress. Bees have a USDA designation of livestock. People are a little bit confused about that, but we do eat honey. They also create another product, wax. So here in Oklahoma, we actually have really good laws to protect beekeepers. The law basically states that you can have bees, and that includes in your neighborhood and things like that. I think that being a good neighbor is important, so making sure that if you do put a beehive in your backyard, that it's in a place that won't interfere with your neighbors. You make sure you let your neighbors know, and items like that. There are costs associated with bees. So like you can see behind me, these boxes have frames in them. There are other pieces of equipment that you just really need, like a bee suit. But just to get started, ballpark range is between maybe say $500 and $700. And so there is a cost associated with that. One of those costs can be purchasing the bees themselves. So this is something that you can't just all of a sudden decide I'm going to have bees tomorrow. Typically there's a season for getting bees. Most people put their orders in January and then pick up their bees around this time of the year. So we already started with a budget for beekeepers to begin with, and then we'll continue to build on that and how certain decisions that you make to manage your hive can impact your profits if you're selling honey. Although bees are a unique species for agriculture, we really need to think of them the same way that we think about cattle and other livestock and managing crops when it comes to decision making.
Dr. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, let's dive right in with the latest news from the markets.
Well, I think the latest news, or the biggest news, is price volatility. You look at wheat prices. Several weeks ago, you could forward contract Oklahoma wheat for harvest delivery for $7.25 a bushel. Then the market over a couple of days took $1.40 off of that price, and then it's been up like 25 up one day, down the next day 15, up to 10 the next day. So you've got a lot of price volatility. Right now you can sell wheat in Oklahoma for around $6.35. You look at the corn market, that forward contract price, now not the current cash price, but the forward contract price was $6.25. Market knocked $1.25 off of that thing. It's gained 60 cents back. Soybeans, $13.75. Knock off $2, come back $1.50. So we got a lot of price variability in the market, or volatility. Also, I was reading an article this week. It was talking about Russia and the European Union competing for being the largest wheat exporter. You go back a couple years, the United States was the #1 exporter of wheat. We're not even mentioned in the article. They talk about the major countries buying. You've got Egypt, #1, you got Algeria, you got Bangladesh, you got Turkey. Where are these countries buying or importing wheat? They're in North Africa. They're over in the area of the European Union and Russia.
A lot of factors there, of course, but what's behind this immediate volatility that you're seeing?
Normally the volatility is caused by supply factors, but in this case we got both supply and demand uncertainty in the market. We talked about the hoarding of the food products and the high increasing food cost. Well, when are countries going to stop hoarding? And when they do, they're going to stop buying. So you've got changes on both the supply side and the demand side that are impacting our prices. And I think that's caused some volatility. And then you got relatively tight wheat stocks in the United States. The year we just ended, the marketing year, 872 million bushels, well below the 1 billion plus average in the United States for wheat. projected next year 774 million bushels, below this year's level and well below the 5 and the 10-year average levels.
You mentioned a lot of countries, but we haven't heard about China yet. What's the latest there?
Well, China's been quiet right now, but you know, on the wheat market, China doesn't import much wheat, and they buy very little wheat from the United States, but when they buy, it's on the margin and it impacts our price. So China is quiet right now, but they're always in the background. They're especially with the soybean market. They impact those prices more than the wheat, and they've been buying a lot of U.S. corn, and so they are an integral part of the corn market. So China's still there, but they're quiet right now.
So what's your guidance for producers in terms of selling in this volatile situation?
Well, what most market analysts are saying, stay on the sidelines. However, during the wheat harvest, you can't stay on the sidelines. Have a written marketing plan and follow it. I say watch the price, but watch the price relative to your target price. Set a price at which you're going to sell above the market and below the market, and when it hits those prices, pull the trigger. Be disciplined.
Okay, great analysis. Good to see you, Kim. Thanks a lot.
This morning I'd like to talk to you about what is referred to as quarantine deworming. Now, most sheep and goat producers are very well aware that we have parasite resistance against all of the dewormers that we have available to treat sheep and goats with. And there's been several studies in the United States and around the world that have proven this over and over. Now, you may ask, how do you get resistant worms? And there's basically two ways you get it. One way is you breed your own. And this can be accomplished if you deworm your animals too many times a year or just over and over and over. And what happens in that case is that we eliminate all the susceptible worms to that dewormer, and what you're left with is a population of worms that are resistant to your dewormers. The second way you can get it is you can buy them. When you go out and purchase an animal and bring it to your flock, and if that animal has resistant worms in it, then it will spread it to your flock that you have at home. Now, one of the ways that we can prevent that from happening, of not buying those resistant worms, is to make sure we follow a good biosecurity protocol. And one of the steps in that is to make sure that we isolate newly purchased animals for about 30 days. During this time that we've got this animal isolated, we want to do two things to it. One, we want to deworm it. And we want to deworm it with 3 different classes of worms, all at the same time, all at their regular doses. The other thing we want to do is do a fecal egg count reduction test. And what we're going to do there is we're going to do a fecal egg count right before we deworm it, and then come back 2 weeks later and repeat that fecal egg count. And then we're going to compare those 2 fecal egg counts. And what we want to see is we want to see at least 90% reduction in those eggs on that second count. If you don't see that 90% reduction, that means that animal is harboring resistant parasites. That's when you have to make a decision. Do I really want that animal to be incorporated into my flock where it can spread those resistant worms? If you'd like some more information about quarantine deworming, if you'll go to sunup.okstate.edu.
We are continuing our conversation with Dr. Brett Carver at the Lahoma Field Day. Brett, let's talk about some varieties you may look at releasing later this year, and they have a common theme, which is Gallagher.
Oh, absolutely, and everybody's familiar with Gallagher by now. We want to continue that Gallagher legacy, but improve upon it in terms of yieldability, but also introduce now a new component that I think will influence and contribute to the food industry. Think about the way we buy bread products. Sometimes we buy a whole wheat product, and that whole wheat product needs a little bit stronger gluten in it to support that dough when it's being developed in the mixer, and then of course when it's fermented and then baked. We don't have quite that level of strength. Sometimes the bakers will bring in hard-red spring wheat to give that extra push it needs to make it through that rigorous process, particularly in a whole wheat product. Why not just have that capability in our hard red winter wheats to begin with? And it is present in some other wheats, but very, very rare. We just don't have it in Oklahoma. That's what we're looking at today now. This is about a Usually it's 10 years, and I can say it's about 10 years for these as well. To get that kind of gluten strength into a Gallagher background, but as I've always said before, we like choices. Okay, so we didn't just stick with Gallagher as we have here. We also have an experimental that served as the recipient for this gluten strength trait. And it was an experimental we never released. It was available for release at the same time we released Bentley, so our viewers will know about the timeline of that. But this is an OK 10-1-30 background, a little bit higher yielding ability than the Gallagher background across the state. However, the Gallagher can step up in certain places. So I'm really thrilled to see this combination of agronomics and quality, a very unique combination. It is so unique that these will be classified in terms of their gluten strength similar to some of the Canadian extra strong wheats, and that's just almost unheard of in the U.S. And I think that's going to be a welcome product in our bread industry.
And the industry, it sounds like, is asking for it, needs it, and wants these more innovative type of products to work with.
That's right, and now they have a little bit closer direct access to the genetics instead of having to bring it in really from another country.
Great. Well, thank you for the update, and we'll look forward to hearing more later this year.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Good morning, Oklahoma. Welcome again to Cow-Calf Corner. This week, again, we're joined by Dr. Dan Stein, and we're going to talk about reproductive tract scoring. Dan, what is reproductive tract scoring?
Mark, reproductive tract scoring is just another management tool that we have for when we're making selection of our heifers to come into our breeding herd. Reproductive tract scoring is an evaluation of the reproductive tract, of the maturity of the reproductive tract, and it's a numeric score from a 1 to a 5, and again, it's just an evaluation of the maturity of that female as far as reproductively. The cost of keeping that female is part of our efficiency, and if I can make that decision earlier, not even take them into breeding season, let somebody else worry about that animal, again, then I can maybe tighten up my calving interval, like we talked about earlier, using our synchronization protocols the last couple of weeks. Since that's what it is, it's a tool that we can do, management tool.
Interesting, yes. Interesting. So Dan, who can do reproductive tract scoring for us?
If we do a lot of AIing, and you're used to, again, the reproductive tract as far as the differences in the tracts, you can teach yourself. Your veterinarian, if they're out doing any work in your herd as far as, then they are capable of doing that as well. But the key thing on this is when we talk about incorporating our synchronization protocols is that a tract score, it's been shown that a tract score 3 and above, I can manipulate with my ester synchronization. A 1 and a 2 will usually not respond. So not every time when we talk about ester synchronization are we going to get animals responding, and we're wondering why. But part of this is the maturity of that female tract. So kind of rule of thumb is if I have a 1 or 2, I'm just going to probably take those on down the road and let somebody else worry about that problem. And then I'm going to have my 3s, 4s, and 5s that I'm going to be able to manipulate and manage, and we can get them in that first part of that breeding season, and that's what we're after.
Well, Dan, thank you for joining us. I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate you all joining us on Cow-Calf Corner. We will see you next week.
Finally, today we are talking research and the major OSU discovery that is helping to shape wheat breeding now and well into the future. Sunup's Ed Barron has this story.
Wheat and cattle are the backbone of Oklahoma agriculture. However, with dual-purpose wheat, timing is everything.
First holostem is the critical time in which we decide to remove cattle to go from grazing to grazing termination, to now grain production, that first hollow stem is the critical trigger in making those decisions when to pull the cattle off.
But knowing when that is can be a challenge.
So it's a lot of time, it's a labor work. So for me, I just wanted to see which gene control the time when wheat get elongated. Then clone this gene.
Hang on, let's back up to where it all started, when Dr. Yan decided to breed Billings and Duster wheat varieties.
We have a pretty good idea on how to predict maturity, whether it's first hollow stem maturity or heading maturity or actual finishing maturity, but we were never able to make the complete prediction. We had the genes to distinguish many varieties, but we could not distinguish Duster from Billings.
Duster, being a dual-purpose variety, and Billings, mostly for grain only, have very different maturity rates.
But we don't know which gene control this difference.
And we know Duster and Billings differ at all three of those stages. So what was the one missing piece? That is the gene that Dr. Yan discovered.
And finding that gene is the first step in pinpointing first hollow stem.
So this discovery or this gene we cloned will be very useful for the wheat production in the world.
I hope there's a day in which we can tell farmers if they have this variety, then giving this year, whether it's an earlier year or a later year, you should expect this variety to reach first hollow stem on this date or in this general area of dates, 2 or 3 days. We cannot do that yet. This is the piece that will get us there. I think maybe put us there.
At Oklahoma State University, I'm Ed Barron.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.